Commissioner O'Donnell, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
And Fielder's here too.
Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. Time is now 9:30 a.m. Today's date is Tuesday, June 11, 2024. This is the time and place for our regularly scheduled business meeting here at the Montana Public Service Commission. We are in the Commission Conference Room, otherwise known as the Bollinger Room. I call this meeting to order. Would my colleagues join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance?
United States of America, and to the republic which is stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all.
All right, thank you, colleagues. I would note for the record that Commissioner Panochi, myself, and Commissioner Bukacek are present in the Bollinger Room. Vice President Fielder and Commissioner O'Donnell are online. Therefore, we do have quorum. All right, the Montana Public Service Commission welcomes public comment on any matter that is on today's agenda or on any matter that is within the jurisdiction of the Montana PSC. Are there any public commenters in the room? Anybody that would like to make public comment in the room? Seeing none. Are there any public commenters online? I am being informed there are not, so no public comment this morning. So we'll move forward. There are no changes to the work session items this morning, so let's roll into action item number 1. That's approval of the commission minutes the week of May 27, 2024. Is there a motion? I will move to have the commission adopt the draft minutes for the week of May 27, 2024.
I'll second.
Minutes. All right, we have motion second. Discussion. Any revisions to the minutes as drafted? Changes? Revisions? Seeing none, all those in favor of my motion to adopt the commission minutes for the week of May 27, 2024 as written signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, minutes are approved. All right, let's move into work session item number 1. This is docket 2024.05.060. This is Circle H Water. This is on the petition to amend rules for small water utilities. We're here to consider Circle H Water's request for a public hearing on its petition for rule making. Ms. Wachowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, good morning. By way of an update, on Friday, the commission received from Circle H a notice of withdrawal of request for hearing. And just for the record, I'll go ahead and read that since it's relatively short. It states as follows. In its petition for rulemaking that was accepted for filing by the Public Service Commission on May 28, 2024, Circle H Water, Inc. requested a hearing on its petition for rulemaking. Upon further consideration, Circle H has decided that a hearing is not appropriate at this time. Therefore, Circle H is hereby withdrawing its request for a hearing on its petition for rulemaking.
All right, question for you, Ms. Wachowski. Does the commission itself need to take any action, or is that just withdrawn as a matter of law?
Mr. President, Commissioners, yes, typically we would just acknowledge this as a withdrawal and not take any particular action upon it.
Okie dokie. Thank you. All right, let's move to work session item number 2. This is a commission initiated matter. This is for us to consider amending Administrative Rule of Montana 38.3.401 sub 3, which currently requires Class D motor carrier applications to be notarized, and in lieu to require applicants to verify that all statements contained in their application are true to the best of their knowledge, information, and belief. Good morning, Amanda.
Good morning, President Brown and commissioners.
As you stated, before you is a proposed amendment to the administrative rule, which currently requires all motor carrier applications, which is class A, D, and E currently to be notarized. This rule was identified for amendment as part of staff's ongoing effort to amend and improve all of our motor carrier application forms. We've received a few Class D applications recently and more still coming in. There's been multiple occasions where an applicant will submit their application. It's already been notarized, but then they need to make an amendment. And this involves lots of back and forth between our compliance staff and the applicant. And to make this process more efficient for everyone involved, we believe the rule would be improved by including a reference to the statute, which allows any verification that's required under law to be with like force supported by an unsworn written declaration, which would require, if the application is executed in the state, for the applicant to affirm that I declare under penalty of perjury the foregoing application is true and correct. So we would make that amendment to the rule. Staff recommends that the commission issue motion to approve the draft notice of amendment and authorize staff to make any non-substantive changes required for publication in the Montana Administrative Register, after which there would be a 28-day public comment period to receive any views or further thoughts from the public about this amendment. And then we would come back before the commission to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking if we decided to go forward with this. And I would be happy to stand for any questions. And a last note, this matter is assigned docket number 2024.06.063 if anyone is interested in making public comment. Thank you.
Right. Is there a motion? Commissioner Bukacek?
I make a motion to approve the draft notice of amendment and authorize staff to make any non-substantive changes required for publication.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Panochi has a second. We have a motion and second discussion. Clarifying question? Ms. Webster? So let me speak to the merits first. First is I think this is an excellent proposed amendment. It will make it easier, not only for applicants, would need to do no more than self-verify, as is allowed under Montana law, I would note. But the second thing is, are we changing the rules such that the original application has to be notarized and then any amendments to the application are self-verified, or it's just self-verification all the way through at this point?
President Brown, staff recommends that the application be just verified all the way through from the beginning and any subsequent amendments.
Okay, so the entire process will just require self-verification under Montana law.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I'll speak to in favor of Commissioner Bukacek's amendment. As I stated, several years back, the Montana legislature passed a statute that allowed for self-verification in lieu of doing a notary requirement. I seem to think it was the 2011 session, if my memory serves me correctly. That process has proved over time to be very convenient for those who need to have government documents such as an application, a Class D application like this to be executed and filed. This is a good amendment for the public and procedural ease, and so I will be supporting it. Additional discussion? Additional discussion? No takers? All right, those in favor of Commissioner Bukacek's motion to approve the draft notice of amendment and authorize staff to make any non-substantive changes, signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Webster. Great, let's roll on. We'll move to work session item number 3. This is a commission initiated matter. We are here to consider FERC Order 1920, but more specifically to have and to consider having the Public Service Commission and the commissioners specifically file a request for rehearing of FERC Order 1920. Good morning, Mr. Sanders.
Good morning, President Brown, commissioners. You have before you a draft request for rehearing, which, if approved by the commission, would ask the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, hereinafter referred to as FERC, to reconsider aspects of its recent order 1920, which modified federal rules regarding electric transmission planning. Staff recommends approving the request and authorizing staff to make non-substantive edits for clarity and consistency. In 2021, FERC issued an advance notice of proposed rulemaking outlining potential reforms to improve the electrical regional transmission planning and cost allocation and interconnection processes. This rule was entitled Building for the Future Through Electric Regional Transmission Planning and Cost Allocation. The commission submitted brief comments in response to the notice of proposed rulemaking in November 30th of 2022. Those comments largely echoed the concerns expressed by the National Association of Utility Commissioners, NARUC, in its formal comments. On May 13th, 2024, FERC issued its final rule. The FERC decision makes significant sweeping changes to the processes transmission providers must use when planning long-term regional transmission projects. Among other changes, Order 1920 will require transmission order providers to plan regional transmission projects based on long-term scenarios that account for 1, federally recognized tribal, state, and local laws and regulations affecting resource mix and demand. 2, federally recognized tribal, state, and local laws and regulations on decarbonization and electrification. 3, state-approved integrated resource plans and expected supply obligations for load-serving entities. 4, trends in fuel costs and in the cost, performance, and availability of generation, electric, storage resources, and building and transportation electrification technologies. 5, resource retirements. 6, generator interconnection requests and withdrawals. 7, utility and corporate commitment and federally recognized tribal, state, and local policy goals that affect long-term transition needs. When Order 1920, paragraph 409, when long-term regional transmission facilities are built, the cost of those facilities must be allocated in a way that corresponds to the benefits those facilities provide. Order 1920 requires all transmission providers to measure and allocate costs based on 7 categories of benefits. 1, avoided or deferred reliability transmission facilities and aging infrastructure replacement. 2, a benefit that can be characterized and measured as either reduced load or reduced loss of load probability or reduced planning reserve margin. 3, production cost savings. 4, reduced transmission energy losses. 5, reduced congestion due to transmission outages. 6, mitigation of extreme weather events and unexpected system conditions. And 7, capacity cost benefits from reduced peak energy losses. In paragraph 720, the order allows states in a region to agree to a cost allocation methodology with certain limitations. If states are unable to agree to a cost allocation methodology, a backstop methodology approved by FERC would control Order 1920. In paragraph 1292, it is unclear to staff what that backup methodology would entail. In short, commissioners, I'll say this. This is perhaps the most sweeping federal intrusion into transmission planning that we've seen in the history of plant transmission planning in the United States. Many states have raised concerns about how individual state policy goals will affect these planning and cost allocation factors. For example, if a state has emphasized decarbonization through its laws or rules, those state policies may influence which regional transmission projects will be prioritized and constructed. The costs associated with those projects will then need to be allocated across the region, even if the project would not have been a priority or a necessity for a state without a decarbonization policy. While a voluntary state agreement process could prevent unjust or unreasonable allocation of regional transmission project costs, the backstop methodology may still cause Montana retail ratepayers to bear the burden of other states' policy decisions. The draft request asks FERC to reconsider the imposition of mandatory planning and cost allocation criteria that will burden non-consenting states with costs driven by other states' policy goals. The draft request also asks FERC to reconsider its, quote, state government, end quote, procedure to allow states to meaningfully object and prevent one state's regional policy decisions from raising rates across the region. Staff recommends approving the draft request and authorizing staff to make non-substantive edits to improve clarity and consistency.
Hold on. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Mr. Graff, anything to add? Mr. Graff waves off. You had a question, Commissioner Pinochi? Or do you want to make the motion?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion to accept staff recommendations.
All right. Is there a second? Commissioner Blumencheck?
I second.
All right, we have motion and second discussion. I'm assuming that Commissioner O'Donnell is going to want to speak on this, so I'll call on you first, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, this one aspect of this that Mr. Sanders alluded to, but to clarify also, is that he mentioned this is a sweeping change to the transmission authority on this, and it seems to me that there was a very significant war in the history of this country fought over states' rights. This clearly runs totally in the face of all policy decisions made in this country and the Constitution itself in terms of what authorities are granted to the states. This is a federal takeover of that, and it seems to me that this is of not just a small arcane little rule that might affect this as a sea change in terms of how states have their authority relative to the federal government. And I support this motion enthusiastically. Thank you.
Pinochi.
Thank you, Mr. President. A question for Mr. Sanders. Who approved this? How did this happen? Explain.
Commissioner, President Brown, Commissioner Pinochi, this was approved by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is a 5-member regulatory body at the federal level, which governs electric transmission and other energy policy issues. What I would say that without unfairly characterizing the process, this was approved on a 2-to-1 vote. There are only 3 members currently serving on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and it was approved on a 2-to-1 vote. Basically, this policy has been described, I think, accurately by the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal as a backdoor attempt to achieve what could not be achieved through the Congress of the United States because of objections by a number of senators. And so the rule couldn't get passed as a statute. And so the administration decided to move this through the administrative processes of government through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and it was passed on a 2-to-1 vote. There's a vigorous dissent raised by FERC Commissioner Mark Christie, which outlined some of the concerns which I think a number of states, including Montana, share.
Follow up.
Follow up.
Give me some ideas what we may do. We turn to the legislature. Do we talk to our U.S. congressman? Do we talk to our U.S. senator? Do we talk to our governor? What are some ideas you have there?
Well, the process for right now, President Brown, Commissioner Pinocci, the process for right now is to file this notice of rehearing so that we can exhaust all of the administrative processes that are available to people who filed on this before and who are filing on this now, requesting a rehearing. One of the issues is that, under the Federal Administrative Procedures Act, this final rule bears almost no resemblance to the original advance notice of proposed rulemaking or the notice of proposed rulemaking. So we'd seek relief from FERC itself to rehear the question. If they fail to rehear the question, then I think we'd have to look at other remedies in other branches of government, and those might include the judicial branch through the federal appellate process, and perhaps the Congress would be probably not this Congress, but a future Congress may be willing to act on this issue.
Thank you. No more questions.
Commissioner Bukacek?
Mr. President,
Hold on, Commissioner O'Donnell. Commissioner Bukacek?
I have some
Thank you.
prepared statements. I greatly appreciate Commissioner O'Donnell's statements. Staff responded quickly and rallied together, allowing us to meet the June 12th deadline for making a request for a rehearing. I have read broadly on the topic of FERC Order 1920, being aware of the complexity of the arguments for and against the order and the difficulty of composing documents that are both comprehensive and concise at the same time. Our staff deserves the highest commendation for their efficient use of a short period of time to produce a high quality product in this draft. Staff used strong language in this draft, and rightly so, pointing out where FERC erred in multiple instances, from a practical standpoint, defied reason, and placed the Montana Public Service Commission in an untenable and unlawful position. The conclusion of this draft politely asks FERC to reconsider their mandates that include elimination of voluntary state agreements. Going back to Commissioner O'Donnell's comments. FERC Commissioner Mark Christie was the one of 3 opposing votes. To quote his dissenting remarks, quote, Commissioner Christie, this rule is a pretext to enact a sweeping policy agenda that Congress never passed, a policy that is intended to facilitate a massive transfer of wealth from consumers to for-profit special interests, particularly generation developers, primarily wind and solar transmission developers and influential, powerful corporations with preferences as to the types of power they want to purchase, end of quote. And the corporation Commissioner Christie refers to are the likes of Amazon, Google, Meta, and Microsoft, which have set clean energy targets. That's Commissioner Christie. This is me. The audacity behind Order 1920 is stunning. 2 votes from a 3-person federal government panel in Washington, D.C., dictating to the states how they're going to utilize transmission lines, grid interconnections, and energy resource planning. It is not hyperbolic to say this thwarting of states' rights could potentially be deadly to Montanans. States like Montana that have had overall sensible energy policy will be kicked to the curb in favor of states like California, Washington, and Oregon that have hypocritical, self-destructive energy policies. Montana will become nothing more than an energy transmission conduit for these states. If FERC Order 1920 is allowed to follow through its natural progression, Montanans will freeze to death. Montanans get 42% of their energy from coal that cannot, I repeat, cannot be replaced by solar, wind, and battery storage, or made significantly cleaner by experimental and prohibitively expensive green carbon capture. FERC Order 1920 will be met with great resistance by Montanans, including this commissioner. Rather than waiting for this to become a deadly battle, I appreciate the opportunity to try to right this wrong in the light of day, professionally and procedurally at this point. My vote will be yes for a rehearing of FERC Order 1920. Thank you, staff, for your outstanding work.
Excellent comments. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I quite agree with the strength of Commissioner Bugachek's comments. One additional thing that I wanted to point out in response to Commissioner Pinocchi's question of how this got started is that there are three stages to this rule. There is the notice of advance notice of rulemaking, and then there is the notice of rulemaking or proposed rulemaking, and then there is the final order. The first two stages did not have any of these abrogation of states' rights to them, and this was really quite a surprise how this came at the very end right there. And the word surprise, the undertone of that is a bait and switch type of technique on this thing, and it's the significance of this is not to be understated at all. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Vice President Fielder, do you have any remarks?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think my colleagues and our staff have covered this issue exceptionally well, and I can't disagree with anything that's been stated. So I will be definitely supporting the motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vice President. Additional discussion? All right, I'll weigh in. I am going to support the motion. And I'm going to do so in a couple ways. One is by commending few folks, but then also talking about the substance of this. So where I'd like to start is to recognize Commissioner O'Donnell for his work on behalf of the commission in serving as our point person for many regional organizations and tracking what's happening on the national level. Commissioner O'Donnell certainly brought this matter, the FERC Order 1920, to the commission's attention some months ago and recommended that we pay attention to what was going on at FERC. Second is that Commissioner O'Donnell and I attended the Western Regional Conference of State Commissioners late in May in Vail, Colorado. And during that excellent conference, we were able to speak personally with for Commissioner Christie about this matter, but also we were able to speak with our colleagues from Wyoming and Idaho and Utah, our commission colleagues, about FERC Order 1920 in its current form. And there was a consensus among the commissioners from those states that this is extremely problematic for the Rocky Mountain Western states. And namely, as stated, states that have not adopted carbon goals as state policy mandates. It was interesting that a substantial portion of that Vail conference was dedicated to discussing this order. And I can tell you there was a split among commissions as to the wisdom of the draft issued by FERC, and it split mainly along those lines of those states that either had adopted carbon goals or those that didn't. And that moves us into the policy or the substance of the order. I think my commission colleagues, and certainly Mr. Sanders, you did an excellent job of presenting this morning, have outlined what's problematic about this order, particularly for the ratepayers of the state of Montana. And that is that as stated by Commissioner Christie, this appears to be a clear attempt to socialize the costs of carbon goals in individual states across the United States by violating what's known as the cost causation principle of regulatory rate making, where if you take an action that results in cost causation, then those that pay for it should be the one, or those are the ones that cause the cost should be the ones to pay for it. But what we're seeing as a result of this rule is that you're having customers now in Rocky Mountain states essentially pay for green policy mandates of California, Oregon, and Washington, and the federal government and the Biden administration at that. That being said, as my colleagues have stated, this Order 1920 is breathtaking in its scope, in that it exceeds the jurisdiction of FERC, and frankly, I believe it has a clear legal problem that it is certainly not authorized by Congress. And I suspect that if this order is challenged in court, which I suspect it will be, that will be a problem for FERC in trying to defend the legality of its order. But as also stated, the scope of this FERC Order 1920 does diminish the role of the states in siting of transmission projects to ensure that they meet not only local concerns, but state concerns. So there are multiple legal issues with FERC Order 1920. I do want to acknowledge, as I stated, our staff for turning around these comments and the request for rehearing in such short order. I can tell you that the staff had to digest a substantial amount of information in order to prepare what is before us. And not only that, to then share it with the commissioners in advance of today's meeting to meet a strict deadline for us to file these comments. And so I think this is an example of how competent and prudent the staff at the Montana Public Service Commission is, and they're to be commended for the work they do in protecting the ratepayers of Montana. Now, that being said, I will be supporting this motion. Additional discussion? Additional discussion?
Mr. President?
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yes, thank you for the recognition of the great work that staff has done on this in a very short period of time. I'd also like to point out the tremendous work being done on this by our executive director, Mr. Sanders, who reached out to many commissions nationwide and to ascertain ideas and approaches on this. And I think he's deserving of very special recognition. Thank you.
Second that motion. Commissioner Bukacek.
I also want to give accolades to Trevor Graff, as he's responsible for a lot of the substance of this, and his work is just amazing. He's this humble, quiet man who has done a great job. So appreciate both of you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. If I might, of course, I'd also like to recognize the work not only of Trevor, who sits next to me and offices next to me, but also Lucas Hamilton, our chief counsel, Dan Polko, staff attorney, also Will Rosequist, chief regulator, Neil Templeton is a senior analyst for us, an economist, and Haley Gobert, who also worked on this. It's really not me, and the leadership of this commission. It's easy to do good work when you know you have good commissioners who think the right way on these things and have the best interests of the ratepayers of Montana at heart. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Commissioner Pinocchi's motion, I believe. Was it Commissioner Pinocchi? Yep. All those in favor of Commissioner Pinocchi's motion signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition. The request for rehearing of FERC Order 1920 is approved. That concludes our work session items for the day. So just some general announcements for those who follow these Commission proceedings, our next commission business meeting will be Tuesday, June 18, 2024, at the usual time. And then the commission will be before our Appropriations Oversight Committee next week, June 20th, 2024, to go over our year budget. Seeing no further business to come before the commission, I will adjourn. The time is now 10:05 a.m. I will adjourn today's business meeting.